Hey everyone, doing well, I hope. Now, before we dig into the tutorials for these three solos, I just want to let you know what I'm doing here as it relates to the title of this video. Now, as you may know or may not know, my channel is a bit all over the place as far as guitar content goes. There's covers, tutorials, the odd guitar top 10 list here and there. Bit of this, bit of that, different genres of play, different decades of focus with regards to classic rock guitar, so on and so forth. However, over the past 2 years or so, that focus has become more and more directed at the guitar greats of the 70s. This seems to be where my heart lies when it comes to classic rock guitar. You know, the 60s were great as well, of course. Hell, you know, the 60s gave us Clapton, Page, Jeff Beck, Jimi Hendrix, amongst many others. But it's the 70s when things really kicked into overdrive when it comes to the lead guitarist being a front and center force in the rock and roll mix. Instead of a handful of guitar greats of the decade, kind of like the 60s more or less, there were now dozens and dozens of big name players making and leaving their mark on the scene in both rock and early metal. What started in the 60s as a strong breeze was now a full force gale as the 70s got underway and progressed throughout that decade. And that is where we're going with this series of tutorials back to the 70s to learn some of the greatest guitar solos that the 70s had to offer. Starting with this uber famous trio of solos from the great Joe Perry and Aerosmith from their 1975 album Toys in the Attic. So grab your guitar, get those fingers limbered up, plug in your amp or your guitar software, and get ready to learn the three classic 70s solos to Walk This Way by Aerosmith. But first, let's close in here a little bit on the fretboard. Good then, the three solos to Walk This Way by the great Joe Perry and Aerosmith. First up, we are in standard tuning for this tutorial, and for the first two shorter solos, we'll be soloing in C, using pretty much the 6-note blues scale in two different positions. The first solo takes place all right here at the 8th fret position of the blues scale, starting on the 8th fret of the D string. That little box right there. And the entire solo takes place in that box, except for the very last note. The second solo, we're going to shift all of that down 3 frets to more of an A minor position of the blues scale. However, we'll still be soloing in C major, as this 5th fret position of the scale is the relative minor position of our C major key. The longer outro solo switches off to E major, and again, we're going to be sticking pretty much to the blues scale. But in this solo, we'll be grabbing a few notes out of the major scale as well, just to add to the fun. So let's dig into this. Let's give a quick playthrough of the first solo, and then we'll learn how to play it, shall we? So we're starting with a little half-step bend at the 11th fret of the high E string. And when you get that up a half step, you're going to choke the note off. Into that. A little trill between 8 and 11. A little bounce back and forth between 11 of the B back to the 8 of the high E. Right into a full step bend with some nice vibrato on it on the 11th fret of the B string. So that's the first lick of the first solo. And then we're into this. So we're heading back to the 8th fret of the high E, and we're going to go right up the scale until we get to the 8 of the G string. Hitting every note in the scale. And then after you get to that 8, you're going to go back onto the 10 of the G and then roll up to the 10 of the D string. And then back to the 8. Quick little bend release from the 10 off to the 8. And then finish that whole little progression on the 10 of the D string. So the one little key in this little section of the solo is this little roll that you're going to do, right? Right there. So from the beginning. Now, immediately we're going to jump down here to this note, 9th fret of the B string, which is not in our blues scale, but we're not going to be hanging on that very long. We're going to be giving it a full step bend up to a note within the blues scale. That note itself is out of the minor scale, but you know, you could use that if you wanted to. It'd probably sound fine. But we're just pretty much using it as a passing note and then immediately bending up to, you know, that note there. And that finishes up the solo. So from the bend, so you're going to go 8 to 11, back to the 8, and then just riding down this little, you know, the blue note there at the 11th fret, 10 off to 8. And then you're going to just bounce back and forth here 2 or 3 times on the 8 to 10. Back up to the blue note again. And then grab that 11th fret of the B string for a full step bend. And right at this point, there's a key change going on. The whole band jumps to A, and he grabs that A note there. Bit of an off note here from our scale on the 7th fret of the D string. So that's the final third of the solo. All right, that is that solo. Let's run through it at a nice relaxed pace here, and then we'll dig into the second solo. That's the first solo. Let's have a look at the second solo. All right, the second solo, we're going to move everything that we just, we were right here, right? In that little box, right? Now we're going to move it all down 3 places to the more of an A minor position. But it is the relative minor of C, so it's going to work a charm here as well. So, and this whole solo pretty much takes place in that box. You know, we do extend it back here to the 3rd fret of the A, and I'll show you that when we get to it. But let's have a quick play through this one, and I'll show you guys how to play it. So we're starting with these very loosely played double stops. Kind of that feel, right? We're going to start with this double stop here on the 5th fret of the G and the B. It's a bit of a dissonant double stop, but we're not going to be on it very long. And then you're going to grab the double stop on the 8th fret off to the 5th fret. And then you're going to grab a single note at the 8th fret of the B and then go back to the double stop on the 5. Kind of like that. But it's, you know, it's very loose. Just... So after you do that little double stop progression at the beginning, you're going to ride the 8 to 7 back to the 5 of the G, back onto the 7 for a full step bend. So you're going to bounce them back and forth here on the 5, 7 2 or 3 times before going into that bend. Kind of like that. Now you're going to release that bend off to the 5 of the D into that lick right there. So you're going to grab that 5 of the D and then grab the octave of that note at the 8th fret of the B. Off to the 5 of the B, up to the 8 of the G. Now down to back to the 5 of the B, roll up to the 5 of the G, onto the 7 of the D, right into a half step bend. right? So you're going to land on that, and then you're going to pick it again before bending it. So you're picking that 7th fret twice. So from the beginning. And now that half step bend, you're going to kind of release and slide out of that and jump onto the 3rd fret of the A string. And then slide right back to the 7th fret again. And then you're going to play that lick twice. 5 onto 8. Pull back off to 5. Grab the 7 of the D back to 5. You're going to do that twice. And then after you go back to the 5th fret of the G string for the final time, you're going to roll down to the 5 of the B. And do the same thing, but now hammering on 8 to 5 of the B and grabbing the blue note there at the 8 of the G before going back to the 5. Kind of like that. And then again, you're going to grab that blue note, 8, 7, 5, then bounce back and forth here again. And then after you bounce back and forth here on the 5, 7 2 or 3 times, you're going to grab that 7, give it a kind of slow bend, drop your pinky on the 8th fret of the B and the E, and then finish on that A note the same way we finished the first solo, because same key change going on in the song. And those notes are very quickly played together. So one of the more difficult little parts of this, of any of these solos, is this part. Because at speed, it's really quick. It's fun. Got it? Let's run through that whole solo nice and slow, and then we'll move on to the outro solo. Right then, let's move on to the outro solo. That's pretty much the end of the solo right there. It's all fading out. I think that's about the last note you can hear, the 15th fret of the B string. So the lead into the solo. 2nd fret of the G string, full step bend. Move it up to the 5th fret, half step, then a full step. Then slide out of it. Repeat. Move the whole thing up an octave, 14th fret. Slide out of it. 17, half step, full step. Slide out of it. Back to 14. This time you're going to pre-bend and then release it. And slide out of it. Back up to 17, half step, full step. And then we're into the solo proper. With that first little lick. 12, and then a little pull off from 15 to 12 of the B. Bend, release, off to 12, 2 more bends. Then you're going to go off to 12, into that. So again, we're just riding up the scale, 12, 15, 14, 12. Right into a bend at 14. Off to 12, grab the 14 of the D, and then roll down into a double stop at the 14th fret. Kind of like that. Right here, there's an extra beat going on, and there's more than one guitar going on here, so it kind of sounds like he's hitting that twice. But I don't think he is. I think he's only hitting it once. It's either another guitar or there's a beat right after he hits that double stop. So from the beginning. Now, one of the coolest licks in all of classic 70s guitar rocks. That is very slick. So we're starting hammering on 12 to 13 of the G string, and then we're going to ride down the 12s of the B and the high E. On to the 16, back off to the 12. And then we're going to go into that. So we're going to hit that 12 again, then we're going to go 15, 12 of the B. Roll back up to the 12 of the G, hammer back onto 13, and then string skip down to the 12 of the high E. Kind of like that. And then we're into this. So we're going to go on to the 15, then we're going to go 14, 12. Up to 14 of the G, back to 12 of the B, and then drop onto the 15, hit it twice, and then the second time you're going to pull it off to 14, then pull it off to 12. Roll back onto the 14, roll back up to the 14 of the D string, down to the 12, drop onto that double stop again. Again. Now let's put the whole thing together. Okay, one more time. And then we're into this. So again, 12 to 13 of the G, string skip down to the 12 of the high E, right into a full step bend at the 15, which you're going to hit 2 or 3 times. And then finally release it back to the natural note. Off to 12, grab this 15 of the B, slide it into 17. And then you're going to grab the 15 onto the 17 of the high E, and then you're giving it 4 or 5 bends. Pull it off, finally off to 15, back onto 17. So that little section there. Kind of like that. And then we're into this. Now, we are a little blues lick here. 14 of the G, down to 12 of the high E, 15 off to 12 of the B. And then we're going to grab that blue note here, 15, pull it off to 14, and then pull it off to 12. And then back onto the 14 for a little bend release. And now we're into a little scale run. And kind of finish on the 10 there of the A string. So here's the scale run. That's it. So we're doing just chromatically going up, kind of like the pentatonic, right? But we're doing some chromatics on the D string and the A string. And finishing on the 10 there. Now, at this point, he's kind of finishing on the 10 there, this whole little scale run. And there's another guitar, you know, going on here, grabbing the 15th fret of the high E and giving a big full step bend. I don't think he's doing it, but you can do it. You have time to do it on one guitar. All right, and now we're going to shift down to the neck position and finish this solo up. So, all going on here on the 2nd fret. Let me get in frame here a little bit better. 2nd fret of the G string. Off to open, grab the 2nd fret of the D. And then the second time you're going to do the exact same thing, but I think you're going to hit that 2nd fret of the G twice. Yeah, quick little pick first, and then bend, release, off to open, grab this 2. So that's what he's doing at that little section right there. Nothing too complicated going on here. You just get the pattern. And you finish that whole little passage up progression there on the 2nd fret there of the G string. And then we're into this. So we're sliding into the 5th fret of the B string, and we're kind of playing the open E string along with it. And then you're going to go off to the open B, open G, and you're going to do that 4 times. Kind of like that. But it's all, you know, quick like that. And then you're going to back it up to the 3 of the B string and don't slide. And do the exact same thing. And then you're finally going to grab the 2nd fret of the G, little bend, release, off to open, back on. And then finishing up the solo, starting to fade out. So bend, release, a little bit quicker, kind of double time this time. And the second time you do it, you're going to do a double hit on that 2nd fret of the D. And then you're going to ride up the scale. It's kind of fading out, a little bit buried in the mix here, but this is pretty close to what he's doing. Just a little pull-offs from 2 to open, do it twice. Do the same thing on the A string. Do the same thing on the 3rd fret of the low E, off to open, before finally ending up in an A power chord. Kind of like that. And really fading out here. Now we're sliding up here to the 12th fret of the B and the G string. And kind of just playing those 2 notes together, starting on the B. And then you're going to do that like 5 or 6 times. And then finally drop onto the 15 of the B string for a full step bend. And I think that's about all you can hear as it's fading out. And that's that solo. So let's take it from the top nice and slow, and then we'll be done. my friends, is how you play the 3 solos to Walk This Way by Joe Perry and Aerosmith. I certainly hope you found that helpful and enjoyed my first installment of these classic solos of the 70s tutorials. If you did, please hit that like button, as that would be awfully kind. Drop me a subscribe if you haven't done that already, as that would also be awfully kind. Hope you're well out there in your little guitar corner of the world, wherever that may find you, and we will see you next time.